Frodo Baggins saved the world. I know this now. Everyone knows it now. The story of the ring and the mountain and the impossible journey that ended Sauron's reign forever. Frodo carried that burden across Middle-earth, bore a weight that would have crushed any other soul, and somehow found the strength to see it through to the end. But when he came home, when he returned to the Shire after everything he had suffered, he found his homeland in ruins. He found his people enslaved, beaten, starving. He found the trees cut down and the rivers fouled and the holes knocked through with ugly new buildings of brick and iron. He found Saruman sitting in Bog End like a spider in a web, smiling at the devastation he had wrought. And Frodo showed him mercy. I was there. I watched him do it. After everything Saruman had taken from us, after the beatings and the burnings and the friends I had buried in shallow graves, Frodo Baggins looked at the wizard who had destroyed our home and told us we could not kill him. I did not understand. I could not understand. How could anyone witness what I had witnessed, suffer what I had suffered, and still find room in their heart for mercy? I have thought about it for years, turning that moment over in my mind, trying to make sense of what Frodo did and why he did it. I still do not have an answer. Perhaps there is no answer. Perhaps some choices are beyond understanding, made by people who have seen things the rest of us can never comprehend. But I can tell you what happened. I can tell you what Saruman did to the Shire, how he broke us, how we fought back. I can tell you what it felt like to watch your world crumble, to find courage you did not know you had, to raise a weapon against enemies who should never have been there. I can tell you my story, and perhaps, in the telling, I will finally understand why Frodo's story ended so differently from mine. My name was Tolman Bracegirdle, and I was a farmer in Bywater. I lived through the scouring of the Shire. I didn't live through what came after. Before the Troubles, I had never been more than 20 miles from the place where I was born. This was not unusual for hobbits. We are not an adventurous people. We do not seek the wider world, do not crave excitement or danger or the strange places that lie beyond our borders. We are content with what we have. Good earth, good food, good ale, the company of friends and family, the turning of seasons in a land that has known peace for as long as anyone can remember. I had a farm near Bywater, 40 acres of the finest soil in the Shire, passed down from my father and his father before him. I grew pipeweed mostly, the long bottom leaf that was famous throughout the region, but also vegetables and grain, and a small orchard of apple trees that my grandfather had planted when he was younger than I am now. I had a wife, Petunia, and 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, all of them healthy, all of them happy, all of them growing up in the same peaceful Shire that had cradled my family for generations. I expected them to inherit the farm, to raise their own children there, to continue the quiet, unbroken line of Bracegirdles working the same land until the end of time. I did not know there were wars being fought beyond our borders. I did not know that darkness was spreading across Middle-earth, that armies were clashing, that the fate of the world hung in the balance. Such things did not concern hobbits. Such things happened far away, to other peoples, and had nothing to do with us. When the first strangers arrived, I thought nothing of it. They were men, the first I had ever seen up close. Tall and rough-looking, with hard eyes and harder voices. They came from the south, they said, sent by someone called Shire to help improve the Shire, to modernize it, to make it more efficient. I did not know what efficient meant, and I did not much care. The Shire did not need improving. The Shire was perfect, as it was and had been perfect for as long as anyone could remember. But the men didn't ask our opinion. They simply arrived, more and more of them each week, and they began to change things. Small changes at first. Rules about when you could travel on certain roads, regulations about how much pipeweed you could sell, and to whom. Taxes that had never existed before, collected by hobbits who had appointed themselves sheriffs, and seemed to enjoy their new authority far too much. I grumbled as everyone grumbled, but I paid my taxes and followed the rules and kept my head down. I had a family to protect. I could not afford to make trouble. Then the changes stopped being small. They came for the trees first. I remember waking to the sound of axes, a rhythmic chopping that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I ran outside, still in my nightshirt, and saw them. Dozens of men, working in crews, cutting down the ancient oaks that had lined the Bywater road for centuries. I shouted at them to stop. I was not the only one. Half the village had emerged from their holes, all of us screaming and waving our arms, demanding to know what they thought they were doing. One of the men, a foreman of some kind, walked over to me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He had a piece of paper in his hand, covered in writing I could not read. "Orders from Shire," he said. "The trees are to be cleared. Progress requires sacrifice." Progress. I could barely form the word. Those trees had been old when my great-grandfather was young. They were part of the Shire, as much as the hills or the streams or the sky itself. What progress requires destroying beauty? The foreman's smile did not waver. "You'll understand in time," he said. "Everyone understands in time." He walked away, and the chopping continued, and by nightfall the Bywater road was bare. I stood where the trees had been, looking at the stumps and the sawdust and the empty spaces where green had been, and I felt something I had never felt before. Hatred. The rules multiplied. The restrictions tightened. Hobbits were arrested for speaking against Shire, for refusing to pay taxes, for looking at the men the wrong way. They were taken to the lockholes, the old storage tunnels near Delving, and they did not come back. We heard rumors about what happened there. Beatings, starvation. Hobbits worked until they collapsed, then left to rot in the darkness. I did not want to believe the rumors. I could not believe them. Such things did not happen in the Shire. Such things could not happen in the Shire. But the arrests continued, and the empty holes multiplied. Families vanished in the night. Neighbors who were there one day and gone the next. And I began to understand that the Shire I had known, the peaceful, predictable paradise where nothing bad ever happened, was dying. Shire came to Bywater in the autumn. I did not know then who he truly was. None of us did. He was just a name, a distant authority, the source of all the orders that had transformed our lives. When I heard he was coming to inspect the region, I felt only curiosity. I wanted to see the face of the one who had done this to us. He arrived in a cart, pulled by a single horse, accompanied by a handful of his men, and a wretched creature that I later learned was called Worm-tongue. He was old, ancient even by Hobbit standards, with a long grey beard and eyes that burned with an intelligence that made me deeply uncomfortable. He walked through the village slowly, examining everything, commenting on the improvements that had been made. His voice was smooth, cultured, pleasant to hear even when the words themselves were cruel. He spoke of efficiency and progress, and the necessity of sacrifice, and the men around him nodded along as if he were speaking profound truths. When he reached my farm, he stopped. He looked at my pipeweed fields, at my orchard, at the hole where my family huddled in fear. and he smiled. "Productive land," he said. "But not productive enough. We'll need to consolidate, move the family to the workers' quarters. This farm will be converted to a mill." I stepped forward. I do not know where I found the courage. "This farm has been in my family for 6 generations," I said. "You cannot simply take it." Sharky turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw past the pleasant mask to the thing beneath. His eyes were cold, empty, filled with a contempt that seemed to encompass not just me, but everything I represented, everything the Shire was, everything gentle and good in the world. "I can do whatever I wish," he said softly. "This is my Shire now, and you are my hobbits. The sooner you understand that, the easier your lives will be." He moved on, and his men moved with him, and I stood in my fields with my hands shaking and my heart pounding, and a fear in my gut that I had never known existed. That night I began to think about resistance. I was not brave. I need you to understand this. I was not a hero, not a warrior, not one of those rare hobbits who felt the call of adventure stirring in their blood. I was a farmer who wanted nothing more than to tend his crops and raise his children and live out his days in peace. But they took my farm. They came a week after Sharky's visit. 12 men with weapons and orders, and that same dead-eyed smile the foreman had worn. They gave us an hour to gather our belongings. Then they herded us toward the workers' quarters on the edge of Bywater, a collection of crude brick buildings that had been thrown up where the old inn used to stand. My wife wept. My children did not understand what was happening. My oldest son, Hamfast, kept asking when we were going home, and I did not have an answer for him. We were not alone in the workers' quarters. Dozens of families had been displaced, their farms and businesses taken, their lives uprooted to serve Sharky's vision of an efficient Shire. We slept on straw and ate thin gruel and worked the fields that had once been our own, now owned by no one and everyone, now stripped of everything that had made them ours. I met others who spoke of resistance, whispered conversations in dark corners, plans that never quite became actions, dreams of a day when the Shire would be free again. Most of it was just talk. We were hobbits. We did not know how to fight. We did not even own weapons, save for the occasional hunting bow or carving knife. But the talk gave me something to hold on to, a spark of hope in the darkness, a belief that this could not last forever, that somehow, someday, things would change. I did not expect the change to come from outside. I did not expect it to come from 4 hobbits riding into Bywater on ponies, dressed in armor, carrying swords, looking like something out of the old stories that nobody believed anymore. I did not expect Frodo Baggins. I knew Frodo, of course. Everyone knew Frodo, or knew of him. He was Bilbo's nephew, the eccentric Baggins who had disappeared months ago, along with his gardener and 2 young tooks. We had assumed they were dead, victims of the Troubles, swallowed up by the chaos that was consuming the world beyond our borders. But here he was, riding into Bywater like a figure from legend, flanked by companions who seemed equally transformed. Sam Gamgee, who I remembered as a quiet lad with dirt under his fingernails, now wore a sword at his hip and moved with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. Merry Brandybuck and Pippin Took were barely recognizable, taller than any hobbits I had ever seen, wearing the livery of foreign kings. They had been gone less than a year. They looked like they had been gone a lifetime. I was working in the fields when they arrived, breaking my back under the supervision of a man who enjoyed using his whip a little too freely. I heard the commotion first, shouts and running feet, and then I saw them. 4 hobbits on ponies, riding through the village as if they owned it, looking at the devastation around them, with expressions that shifted from shock to grief to cold, determined fury. Frodo's face was the hardest to read. He seemed distant, almost peaceful, as if he were looking at the ruined Shire from very far away. There was a sadness in his eyes that I did not understand then, and only partially understand now. He had seen so much, suffered so much, that our local tragedy must have seemed almost small by comparison. But it was not small to us. It was everything. Sam was the one who took charge. Sam, the gardener, the servant, the quiet background presence who had followed Frodo into the unknown. He looked at the felled trees and the brick buildings and the men with their whips, and something hardened in his face. "Right," he said. "This ends now." The rising happened faster than I would have believed possible. Word spread through the Shire like fire through dry grass. The travelers had returned. They were calling hobbits to arms. They were going to drive out the men, overthrow Sharkey, take back everything that had been stolen. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to join them. But when the moment came, when the call went out for every able-bodied hobbit to gather at Bywater, I hesitated. I was afraid. I had seen what the men did to those who resisted. I had seen the beatings, the arrests, the bodies left in ditches as warnings to others. I had a wife, children, people who depended on me. What would happen to them if I took up a weapon and failed? What would Sharkey's men do to my family if I died fighting? Petunia saw me hesitating. She took my hands in hers and looked at me with eyes that held no judgment, only understanding. "You have to go," she said. "If I die, if you don't go, we die anyway, slowly, piece by piece, until there's nothing left of us but bodies that remember being hobbits." She squeezed my hands. "Go. Fight. Win back the Shire for our children." I kissed her. I held my children, one by one, memorizing their faces, breathing in their scent. Then I picked up a pitchfork, the only weapon I could find, and I walked to Bywater to join the rebellion. There were hundreds of us. I had not imagined there were so many who felt as I did, so many who had been nursing their hatred and fear in secret, waiting for a moment that might never come. But here they were, farmers and millers and craftsmen, armed with tools and hunting bows and the occasional rusty sword dug out of an attic. We were not an army. We did not look like warriors. But there were hundreds of us, and for the first time since the Troubles began, I saw fear in the eyes of Sharkey's men. Merry and Pippin organized us with a competence that seemed impossible. They had been soldiers, I learned later, had fought in real battles against enemies, far more terrible than the ruffians who had conquered our home. They knew how to position forces, how to set ambushes, how to turn our numbers into an advantage despite our lack of training. Sam was everywhere, encouraging, directing, his presence somehow making everything seem possible. When hobbits faltered, he was there with a word or a look that steadied them. When the men tried to form up, he was there with a plan to break them apart. And Frodo stood apart, watching, his hand occasionally moving to his chest where something no longer hung. He did not give orders. He did not take up a sword. He simply watched and waited. And when hobbits spoke of killing collaborators, killing the men who surrendered, he quietly told them no. "There has been enough death," he said. "There will be no more killing than is absolutely necessary." I did not understand. After everything that had been done to us, how could he speak of restraint? How could he ask us to show mercy to those who had shown us none? But he was Frodo Baggins, the hero who had saved the world. and his word carried a weight that none of us could ignore. The Battle of Bywater was short and brutal. The men gathered their forces at the crossroads, perhaps 100 of them against our hundreds. They had weapons, real weapons, swords and spears and armor. They had training, they had experience, but they did not have what we had. They did not have the fury of a people who had been pushed beyond endurance. They did not have the desperate courage of farmers fighting for their homes, their families, everything they had ever loved. They did not have 4 hobbits who had faced the darkness of Mordor itself and emerged unbroken. We hit them at dawn, arrows from the hedgerows, then a charge from the flanks, then chaos as hobbits swarmed over them with whatever weapons we could find. I was in the thick of it, my pitchfork red with blood, screaming words I do not remember, fighting with a ferocity I had not known I possessed. I killed a man. I think I killed 2. They were faceless to me in that moment, obstacles to be overcome, threats to be eliminated. The hatred I had nursed for months poured out of me, and I did not feel like a farmer anymore. I felt like something older, something fiercer, something that had been buried inside hobbits for generations and was only now emerging. We were winning. I could feel it, could see it in the way the men began to fall back, the way their formation crumbled, the way fear replaced confidence in their eyes. And then I saw him, a ruffian, larger than the others, fighting his way toward where my family had been sheltering, toward Petunia and my children. I didn't think. I simply moved, throwing myself between the man and my family, raising my pitchfork to block the sword stroke that would have killed me. The impact shattered the handle. I stumbled back, unarmed, and the man smiled. He raised his sword for the killing blow. I thought of my wife, my children, the farm that had been in my family for 6 generations. I thought, I am going to die. I did not see who killed him. One moment the man was standing over me, his sword descending. The next he was falling, an arrow in his throat, and I was scrambling backward through the mud, my heart pounding so hard I could hear nothing else. The battle continued around me, but I could not make myself move. I lay in the mud, shaking, staring at the man who had almost killed me, watching his blood pool on the ground. I had been ready to die. In that moment, I had accepted it. But I was still alive, and the world seemed strange and distant, as if I were watching it from very far away. Someone pulled me to my feet. Sam, I think. He said something I did not hear, pushed a weapon into my hands, pointed me toward where the fighting still raged, and I went. Because what else could I do? I had come here to fight, and the fight was not over, and my family was still behind me, still depending on me to protect them. I found the battle again. I found my fury again. I raised the sword Sam had given me and charged toward a knot of men who were making a last stand near the old mill. I did not see the spear until it was too late. Pain. That is what I remember. Pain, sudden and absolute, spreading from my stomach outward until it consumed everything. I looked down and saw the shaft protruding from my body, saw the blood soaking through my shirt, saw my hands trying to hold something in that did not want to stay. I fell. The battle raged on around me, but it seemed distant now, muffled, as if it were happening in another world. I could see hobbits fighting, could see men falling, could see the tide turning decisively in our favor. We were winning. We were taking back the Shire. And I was dying. I thought of Petunia, of my children, of the farm I would never work again, the grandchildren I would never meet, The quiet, peaceful life that had been stolen from me twice, first by Saruman, and now by a ruffian's spear. I thought of Frodo, standing apart from the battle, refusing to kill. Speaking of mercy and restraint. I had not understood him. I still did not understand him. How could anyone witness what we had witnessed and still believe in mercy? But lying there in the mud, watching my life drain away, I thought I glimpsed something. A shadow of understanding, just out of reach. Frodo had seen worse than this. He had faced evils that made Saruman look like a petty tyrant, and somehow he had come through it with his soul intact, with his capacity for mercy undiminished, with a gentleness that seemed impossible given everything he had endured. Perhaps that was the real victory. Not the killing, not the vengeance, not the blood soaking into the earth of the Shire. Perhaps the real victory was remaining yourself, remaining capable of compassion, even when the world gave you every reason to abandon it. I had not achieved that victory. I had found my hatred, fed it, let it drive me to kill. And now I was dying, and I did not know if what I had done was right or wrong, courage or foolishness, heroism, or simply the flailing of a frightened farmer who did not know what else to do. Petunia found me before the end. I do not know how she reached me, how she made her way through the chaos of battle to the place where I lay. But she was there, her face above mine, her tears falling on my cheeks like warm rain. "Hold on," she said. "Hold on, Tolman, we're winning. It's almost over." I wanted to tell her that it was already over for me, that the spear had found something vital, that no amount of holding on would change what was happening. But I did not have the words. I could only look at her, this woman I had loved for 20 years, and try to memorize her face one last time. The children, I managed. They're safe. Everyone's safe. The men are surrendering. It's over. Over. The word seemed to echo, seemed to carry weight beyond its simple meaning. The scouring was over. The Shire would heal. My children would grow up free. I would not be there to see it. But they would be there. Petunia would be there. The Bracegirdle farm might be rebuilt. The trees replanted. The peaceful world I had known reconstructed from the ashes of what Saruman had destroyed. That had to count for something. That had to be worth dying for. I looked up at the sky. The clouds were breaking, and through the gaps I could see blue, pure and bright and untainted by smoke or shadow. A beautiful sky. A sky worth fighting for. "I love you," I said. Or tried to say. I do not know if the words made it past my lips. The blue above me grew brighter, and then it grew dark, and then there was nothing at all. I learned later what happened after I died. The Battle of Bywater was won decisively. Nearly 70 men were killed, the rest captured or fled. 19 hobbits died, their names recorded in the histories that would be written about that day. My name was among them. Saruman was confronted at Bag End, where he had taken up residence in Frodo's own home. The 4 travelers faced him, and Frodo once again offered mercy. He told Saruman to leave, to go in peace, to trouble the Shire no more. Saruman laughed at him, called him weak, soft, ruined by the ring he had carried, and then he tried to kill him, drawing a hidden knife and stabbing Frodo in the chest. The mithril coat saved him. The same armor that had protected him in the mines of Moria turned Saruman's blade. And still, even after the wizard had tried to murder him, Frodo would not allow the others to take revenge. "He is not worth killing," Frodo said. Saruman left Bag End, walking down the path with Wormtongue at his heels. And there, on the doorstep of the home he had stolen, Wormtongue finally turned on his master, drew a knife and cut Saruman's throat, then was himself shot down by hobbit archers before he could flee. So ended the scouring of the Shire. So ended Saruman the White, once the greatest of the wizards, brought low by his own malice and killed by his own servant. And Frodo, who had saved the world, who had come home to find his world in ruins, who had every reason to embrace vengeance and chose mercy instead. Frodo stood over the body of his enemy and felt no triumph, only sadness, only the weight of everything that had been lost, everything that could not be recovered, everything that mercy could not heal. The Shire recovered. Sam planted a tree in the party field, using soil from Galadriel's garden, and it grew tall and silver-leafed and beautiful. The ugly brick buildings were torn down, the holes were rebuilt, the farms were returned to their rightful owners, and the Bracegirdle land passed to my eldest son, who worked it with the same dedication his father and grandfather had shown. I am told it is beautiful now. I am told the scars have faded, that children play in fields that once ran with blood, that the scouring has become a story, then a legend, then a dim memory that only the oldest hobbits still carry. I am told that Frodo never recovered, that the wounds he had suffered, the burdens he had borne, had broken something inside him that could not be healed in Middle-earth, that he sailed into the west with Gandalf and Bilbo, seeking peace in the undying lands, leaving behind the Shire he had saved twice over. I did not understand him in life. I do not know if I understand him now, but I think, sometimes, that his mercy was not weakness. I think it was the hardest kind of strength, the kind that refuses to let evil transform you into itself, the kind that insists on remaining good even when goodness seems impossible. I found my courage at the end. I found my fury, my hatred, my willingness to kill and die for what I loved. And perhaps that was necessary. Perhaps the Shire needed hobbits like me, hobbits who could become warriors when warriors were required. But it also needed hobbits like Frodo, hobbits who could look at their enemies and see something worth sparing, hobbits who could carry the weight of the world and somehow emerge with their souls intact. I died in the mud of Bywater, a pitchfork in my hand and hatred in my heart. Frodo lived and showed mercy and sailed into the west. I do not know which of us made the right choice. I do not know if there is a right choice in such moments, or only the choices we make and the consequences we cannot foresee. But I know this. The Shire survived. My children grew up free. The world Saruman tried to destroy was rebuilt, better and more beautiful than before. That is what I fought for. That is what I died for. And that in the end has to be enough.